Hi everybody, this is Lisa from the Tilted Thread. I received a question on how to turn a regular piecing pattern into a foundation paper piecing pattern. Generally, it's fairly simple. You are looking for straight lines, and you'll see here for demonstration purposes, I've printed out a 9-patch. The straight lines are very easy and you have a choice on how to divide it up. You could either divide it up and down vertically or side to side horizontally. I'm looking for these long lines. The long lines are going to make nice intersections and give me nice large pieces that are easy to sew together. Using this pattern, now that I've determined where my lines are going to be, I'm going to cut this printed pattern apart on those lines. Now I still have my block just with the pattern pieces cut apart. This would be a wonderful FPP pattern, except we've forgotten one thing. The most important thing, the seam allowances. You're going to need to make yourself seam allowances. Using your cut apart blocks, trace them onto another piece of newsprint. You could use a light board if you have one, or I often use my sewing table, which is clear, and turn on the flashlight on my iPhone, placing it under the table. A window works well too. I did scribble on the traced piece every other block to denote which is the dark fabric apart from the light fabric. Trace each of your pieces and then add your 1/4 inch seam allowances. I use the add a quarter ruler, or you could easily use your Omnigrid ruler. Use the side with the least markings as it's easier to see. I don't normally cut exactly on the seam allowance when I'm trimming the paper patterns. If you fussy cut all your block pieces, you can easily spend a lot of time. Since these will be trimmed away anyway once they are sewn, I just quickly and roughly cut the pattern pieces. Now that I have my block pattern here, making sure I've lined up the pieces correctly, I'm going to rename the pieces so that I know later that I have them in the appropriate order. Normally, in sewing and quilting, you sew from top to bottom and left to right. This will help you have your seams well distributed, so I'm going to number the pattern squares from left to right. The top and bottom will be the same, with 1 on the left and 2 on the right. But for the middle piece, we want to flip the seams, so we will add number 1 on the right and number 2 on the left. Having the seams face in opposite directions will greatly reduce bulk and help the block pieces nicely nest together. If you are doing a different piece that has a lot of triangles or different shapes, getting the seams to properly nest is a little trial and error. After you've made a couple of your own patterns, you will be able to think it through to decide which order the pieces should be sewn. For a complicated piece, you may need to do a test pattern to see how it's working out. And then if you need to make adjustments, simply renumber your pattern pieces. You would sew these just like any regular foundation paper piecing pattern. You'd sew square 1 to A, then square 2 to A. After you've sewn them, you trim 1/4 inch from the seam line. You could use the lines you drew earlier, but even with printed FPP patterns, I like to use the seam line as my guide. Trimming them will remove any excess fabric and will also remove any little bits of paper that remained from rough cutting the pattern. That is how you turn a regular quilt block into a foundation paper piecing pattern. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Happy quilting!